Good morning, William H. Murray, and the Infragard editorial. And let me just, there we go. Okay, now I got you. And Bill, so was Orwell right?
I'm afraid
Okay, take it away, Bill. Orwell was right.
let me give you a couple of data points. The Washington Post carried an article by Sam Horowitz and Ellen Nakashima entitled New Counterterrorism Guidelines Permit Data on U.S. Citizens to be Held Longer. Now, longer is a relative term. Try from 180 days to 5 years.
Wow.
This decision was not made by the Congress, but by the Department of Justice, the bureaucrats. Wired magazine carried an article by James Bamford. You really need to see this one, entitled The NSA is Building the Country's Biggest Spy Center. Subtitled, Watch What You Say. This massive data storage facility is being built in Bluffdale, Utah. It has hundreds of thousands of square feet of storage. And understand that the density of storage doubles every 12 months. So 5 years from now, it's going to be a lot bigger than it is now. NextGov carried an article by Bob Bruin entitled Americans Want Defense, Not DHS, to Guard Cyberspace. Lawmakers say. Right. Posse comitatus be damned.
Right.
Information Week carried an article by J. Nicholas Hoover entitled U.S. Military Readies Cyber Rules of Engagement. The Washington Post reports that the U.S. is accelerating cyber weapon research. Of course, armies do what armies do. One would be naive to hope that they would not. However, in this case, special care is indicated. They should be extraordinarily careful when creating weapons that have a replication cost that approaches zero. Moreover, history demonstrates that it's inevitable that such weapons will leak. Those who live in the world's largest glass house should not lower the cost of stones, should not brag about its own inventory of stones, should not talk about where the stones are stored. A story by Charlie Savage, writing in the New York Times, was headlined, Senators Say Patriot Act is Being Misinterpreted. Savage went on to say 2 senators claimed on Thursday that the Justice Department had secretly reinterpreted the so-called, his words, not mine, Patriot Act in a twisted way, enabling domestic surveillance activities that many members of Congress do not understand. The 2 senators were responding to a story by Kim Zetter in Wired magazine, headlined, Unknown Tech Company Defies FBI in Mystery Surveillance Case. It seems that after issuing 270,000 secret national security letters under the Act, one company served with such a letter finally refused to comply. It's likely that the court will force them to comply, but this will be at least one case in 270,000 in which a court has a say. The USA Patriot Act, and the National Security Letter provision in particular, was specifically drafted so as to resist any attempt at transparency. The DOJ, having drafted the law, will now argue that the law ties their hands. They would love to talk about it. That is what they are doing in its name. But the law that Congress passed forbids it. Congress, having passed the law without reading it, will now accept that defense rather than admit that they were duped. Having been granted this extraordinary power, the bureaucracy will not surrender it willingly. Having granted it, Congress will fear that changing it will make them look soft on terrorism. Top Secret America, a Washington Post publication, carried an article by Dana Priest and William Arkin entitled A Hidden World Growing Beyond Control. Priest and Arkin noted the following. Some 1,271 government organizations and 1,931 private companies work on programs related to counterterrorism, homeland security, and intelligence in about 10,000 locations across the United States. An estimated 854,000 people, nearly 1.5 times as many people as live in Washington, D.C., hold top secret security clearances. Even I hold a secret clearance. In Washington and the surrounding area, 33 building complexes for top secret intelligence work are under construction or have been built since September 2001. Together, they occupy the equivalent of almost 3 Pentagons, or 22 U.S. Capitol buildings, about 17 million square feet of space. Many security and intelligence organizations do the same work, creating redundancy and waste. For example, 51 federal organizations and military commands operating in 15 U.S. cities track the flow of money to and from terrorist networks. Analysts who make sense of documents and conversations obtained by foreign and domestic spying share their judgment by publishing 50,000 intelligence reports each year, a volume so large that many are routinely ignored. I would argue most were probably routinely ignored. We can't blame the press for not warning us. Except for the Priest Arkin story from last year, these stories are all from the last month, and I'm sure that each of you who watches the press knows about some that I've left off the list. This is not the Bush administration that is doing this. Except for 2 senators, our elected officials are silent in the face of this growth in the national security state. Not since the Cold War have we seen such an expansion of government. I understand that the war on terror is supposed to be asymmetric by its nature, but this is ridiculous. Now, all kinds of cautionary tales suggest themselves at this point. Orwell died in January 1950. While he was familiar with the idea of the computer, he had never seen one. In fact, at that time, hardly any of us had ever seen one. His real concern at the time was television. Think pervasive CCTV. One might well want to be a fly on the page when Orwell contemplated the headlines above. Orwell warned us that such capability invites abuse, indeed makes it inevitable. He understood that bureaucrats, simply doing what bureaucrats do, without even any particular motive or intent, will use any available technology to control, not to say enslave, the citizen. As citizens, we should be concerned. However, as security professionals, we have a special interest. Governments around the world are using security as an excuse to extend their police powers and capabilities. 40 nation states now attempt to censor the internet. They are pounding the drums of cyber war. They are creating an environment of fear in which it will take a great deal of courage to risk being seen as soft on cyber terrorism. Not only are we not resisting this, but some of us are cooperating in it. We share responsibility with all our fellow citizens for this erosion of freedom. But as security professionals, we have a special responsibility. That is why we are called professionals and are paid the big bucks. See you next week.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. And now I understand why you say Orwell was right.
Well, there are a whole bunch of cautionary tales. Churchill said, "Who's in charge of the rattling train?" It's not clear that there is any design or intent behind this. It just is going. It's got an inertia of its own, and it seems to go on regardless of. And look, all of this is happening at a time when we are supposed to be short of federal funds, right?
Yeah, no. Well, the bureaucracy feeds itself, and that should come as no surprise to anyone. And they will keep eating as long as we keep feeding. So, thanks. Certainly appreciate it. And
Okay.
we'll hear more from William H. Murray next week on the IG editorial on IGTV. Thank you once again, Bill.